I welcome you all for the 8th Creative Theory Colloquium 2021. The title for this year's colloquium was COVID-19 Pandemic, Grassroot Experiences and Democratic Responses. The colloquium was organized by Foundation for Creative Social Research.
Formally welcome all our friends, our teachers. Let me wish all of you a very happy Teachers' Day. And even before I start the formal welcome, I should be saying something about Professor Mohanty, Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, who has taught us all and who actually visualized a day that is Teachers' Day, when we should deliberate on important issues of our society, state, life, education, so on and so forth. So grateful to you, sir. Creative Theory Group is eternally in gratitude towards you and Vidyutji collectively. Teachers' Day is special because of you. Today we are having our 8th Creative Theory Colloquium, which is no small feat. And we have labored, we have struggled, and here I should be thanking Ashok Vajpayee, who's an eminent political thinker, poet, cultural thinker, organizer of the best kind you can think of. I have, how many words of praise can I sort of, articulate over here? His presence is greatly appreciated. He joined us at the time when we really needed help, financial help, and Raza Foundation came to our support. And this relationship has been a very beautiful intellectual relationship. So, because Ken Srivastav is not here, who's the director of IIC, I welcome him in his absence. We are beginning our 8th Creative Theory Colloquium at a very good note. I must say that this time we have returned to our grassroots legacy. Before this colloquium, we used to have grassroots colloquium, if I remember correctly, at the CRC. And it was a great affair. People like Medha, Patkar, and who all did not come to our colloquium. And the interaction between grassroots thinkers and activists and political theorists and theorists in generally created a symbiotic relationship, which actually is consequential for good scholarship. Our work, all our work is basically very useful, functional, productive, and it's in the genre of what is called praxis. Something people try to theoretically achieve, we have achieved by way of these kind of things that we have organized. So welcome all of you, Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, Professor K.N. Srivastava, Sri Ashok Vajpayee, our other friends, colleagues, Manindra, with whom I have worked for so many years by now, and we sort of deliberate quite a bit before we organize. And this time it is our colloquium, I think, is perhaps very, very important, because we are at a crossroad when we do not know how to think about our future, because we are in the middle of, or in the midst of, an epidemic, a pandemic, a kind of a deathly situation where it is not easy to think in a coherent manner when death is all around. So we thought that in our meetings, we thought that it will be good that we don't get dismayed. We do not get the feeling of hopelessness. We deliberate, come together and see what those people have done at the level of grassroots, where there have not been many facilities for people to protect their lives and lives of their families and children of their community. So for this reason, I think this colloquium is extraordinarily important. Very recently, our good friend, Professor Dr. Gail Ombit, has passed away. Every year, we dedicate our colloquium to an eminent person who's suitable to our ways of doing things, thinking, and so on. So we dedicate this colloquium to her and to many other who passed away during the pandemic because of COVID situation, because of COVID infection. So at this note, I welcome you all again. We hope we have 2 great days of honest, sincere, and serious reflection on grassroots experiences of COVID 19 and the democratic ways of dealing with it. Now I hand over uh, the day to Ashishda and then to Dharmendra and then whoever wants to take over. Priyanka. Priyanka, thank you so much. Priyanka is our strength, and so are other Shalaja and all those people who are helping us. You cannot imagine in which way our students help us, and in which way they are becoming true, authentic intellectuals who will take this particular uh, responsibility, intellectual responsibility forward. Ashishta.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure meeting friends after so long. Now, introducing Grassroots Politics Colloquium. This has been a great experience, as Savita has said. We had 2 volumes published after 7 colloquia. And when I look back to the pages, I found there are so many important pointers. This has to be, I think, re-thought, re-evaluated, and contextualized for today.
Ashishda, can I just intervene? Because after you, you should invite Shri Ashok Vajpayee to say a few words. Then the formality will be over. Then Dharmendra can take over.
Okay, sure. So I'll make it very brief. For example, in the first colloquium itself, we had many activists. The whole purpose was to create a ground where the activists and academics interact. So linking academics to the grassroots experiences had been the main push, the energy. And I think many of us had gone to fields to interact with the activists and came back with reports. I hope this tradition continues every day almost. And also the range of activities that had been included in grassroots, right from performing arts to struggle-based movements, to looking back to theoretical contributions made by, say, as Gail Ombet had said, the Maharshi, well, speaking about Rajarshi Shahu Maharaj, she talked about that the delinquent economy of the Nehruvian, Gandhian, and the statist economy of the left, all these combines in the thoughts of Jyotirao Phule. Why not take it forward? So that sort of observation. Another, say, for example, very first grassroots politics had emphasized on the difference between NGO and action-based politics, action-based organization. So from there, we move on to, say, the second volume, which talks about the emerging caste class dynamics. So these are the things which are coming back again and again. Many of us have experiences of working with the NGOs. Many of us have experienced with exposure of the action-based. What does it mean? What are the theoretical implications there? What are the practicalities which can be adapted by the action groups? Have we been able to suggest ways? Because the activists have been constantly saying that we are in the field, we need theoretical guidance. We can give the feedback, all right, but erasing the widespread struggles that are going on is very important, and that can only come from the academic. I stop here. Ashokji, please.
आप म्यूट पर हैं अशोक जी, माइक ऑन कर लीजिए.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Friends, Raza Foundation and I have been very happy and excited to be associated with the creative theory initiatives. For several years, we have been collaborating, and we are very happy that yet another colloquium is taking place. I think in our times when criticality itself is under serious assault from many quarters, as almost dissent and debate have been criminalized, it is important that an interaction between the activists and the academics continues with vigor and energy, because what we had seen under the pandemic lockdown and the millions of people left helpless, without resources, without transport, and it is these much maligned NGOs which came to their help. Also some religious groups and other kinds of groups, citizens, when the state was almost abandoning them to their fate. It should be noted that it is the people and the citizens who came to help these unfortunate migrants from cities to villages. Also, during the pandemic and the second wave, when there was shortage of oxygen, people waiting and dying for want of oxygen, people waiting, bodies waiting to be cremated, not enough cremation facilities, bodies floating in the holy Ganga, and these were heart-rending events. And yet, the democratic response was so inadequate, in spite of the theatricals of apathy and pain, that one wonders what have we come to in terms of democratic action for the larger section of people. Even a court has to intervene, suggest that vaccination should be free, and then force it upon the state. So we are in a very complex and difficult situation, both theoretically and practically. And I think it will be very interesting to hear the grassroots workers and the academics coming together in this colloquium. I look forward to the colloquium itself and the creative and critical effort. It is important in our time that criticality must bridge its distance from creativity, that the two come together in an organic relationship. And I hope this attempt at bringing them together will continue to get strength, energy, and support from many others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashokji. Without repeating things, I'll directly come to the purpose of this seminar. But before that, I would like to say that against the dominant trend of compulsive and conformist approach, Foundations for Creative Social Research tries to study social reality through a lens of creation, leading towards social transformation. Therefore, for us, research is always a liberatory pursuit. For this purpose, we have been organizing an annual program called the Critical Theory Conference every year, and doing creative research in many areas, which can be considered as heterodox. As pandemic has significantly affected our lives and livelihoods, it has also substantially influenced the scope of grassroots movements. Therefore, we thought it would be meaningful to study the impact of this pandemic from the vantage point of grassroots politics. For this purpose, we decided to have a creative dialogue between academicians studying grassroots movements and activists doing their works in actual fields. The purpose is to understand the difference between pre-pandemic and pandemic period conditions. There are two aspects of it. The first is in relation to state, in relation to the state. Has it provided more leverage to state power? Because we have seen that there is a significant increase in the visibility, or rather the state has become over visible in our lives under the pretext of pandemic laws. Apart from this, over visibilities, state was completely invisible in the areas where it should have been, in the welfare activities and health activities. This is more important in the context of a state which had changed its strategy from co-options to intolerance and repression. On the other hand, it would be meaningful to see what kind of political spaces or opportunities has pandemic provided to grassroots politics. Has it increased the levels of consciousness by exposing the limits of state and sharpening the contradictions, particularly in the sphere of welfare activities? Or has it depressed the masses due to experiences of untold hardship and difficult circumstances? Friends, it was a really difficult year, 2020, and 2021 too. So we need to discuss what kind of space the state and pandemic has provided, particularly to grassroots politics. So this was our purpose, this was our aim, to study and assess our situation, particularly in the light of grassroots politics. So we organized this 2-day program. Or in order to introduce the other session, I would like to invite Survesh, Pratap, who is the moderator. And still we have some 10 minutes time, so we can just start he can introduce the next session, and we will start our session at sharp 10 o'clock. So please, over to Survesh, Pratap.
I was just thinking, since we have 10 minutes time, should we request Professor Mohanty to reflect upon this?
Yes,
Yes, please.
And also Hilal to reflect. 5 minutes each can be used.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Since I'm chairing the next session, and I will make some introductory comments, so spare me. And what about Professor Dr. Srivastava? Has he come or not?
I know I got the message that he could not join today. He will join tomorrow morning.
Okay. So I think
Hilal can say something.
I am going to make a presentation in the next session, so I want to save my energies for that. But just one very brief comment on what Ashish Ghosh sir said at the moment, and this is very crucial for all of us to rethink the question of the imagination which we had when we started our grassroots politics colloquium long back. was that there is a crucial difference between NGOs and social action of different kinds. I think that question is still very important. And COVID has somehow exposed us to these new realities. And therefore, if I link it to Professor Mohanty's work, especially on creative theory and creative society, it would be interesting to at least conceptually look at three regions which have come up at least in the realm of academics. We have something called civil society. Then we have called something called political society, a word coined by Partha Chatterjee. And then we have a creative society, an idea which is actually grew out of our interaction. So I think that these three imaginations of social action need to be linked to what we started in 90s. And this is what the expansion of this would be really meaningful in relation to understand the COVID, or because there is no post-COVID. COVID is still going on. So this particular context. So I think I stop here because I have to say something more on this. So I'll say that when my...
Thank you, Hilal. I think you're right. I must endorse what Akhil said in the beginning, that much of creative theory is product of our engagement with the grassroots. And those wonderful creative years when we had around 20 years, I think we organized Grassroots Politics Colloquium, and that ignited imagination of good number of people in the university. And still everybody who is in teaching now in different parts of the country remember those experiences and keep thinking about organizing similar things. So that was an excellent experiment that Professor Mohanty did at that time. I remember the first meeting when we had a big debate about the role of academicians and the grassroots activists and the dialogue between the two. It was a heated debate, I remember, and we got involved in so much of discussions, but that was really, really creative, and that has caught our imagination even today. And we are trying to pass it on to the next generation and involve new kinds of people in this. And I'm so happy to see new generation coming up and taking up things like this. I teach a course at JNU called Radical Politics in India, which is almost like grassroots, discussing grassroots politics in the class. So many of them will join today, they have joined today, and some of them actually take those works forward. So that's a very positive thing. I think creative theory, what we call creative theory, let me reiterate that idea that we discussed once upon a time when we had reflections on creative theory. I remember Hilal organized that time, that there are three kinds of theories. A theory to theory movement, a theory to reality movement, and then theory to reality and to theory back. That is creative theory. I think theory to theory is what Gopal Guru used to call Hawa Hawai. So it's kind of, you are only flying in the air, have no basis. Then theory to reality, Gopal Guru calls it theory in search of reality. That you have a theory, now you want to explain the reality. You can't correct the theory, so you correct the reality. I mean, you adjust the reality so that it is well explained by theory. I think our project is that we do engage intellectually with theories all around, produced in different cultures, by different groups, by different society, in different societies, during different struggles. But we put our foot on the ground. So we are constantly engaging with our own reality. And as to use Professor Mohanty's expression that he did in his paper on changing terms of discourse, that we are using the third world experience, or our experience, or now I call the experience of the marginalized societies and communities, as a springboard to theorize. And then we engage with different theories from that angle. I think that is our creative effort. It has been not very simple journey. I think among ourselves, lot of questions are there. We don't agree to each other. We have heated debates on our creative theory group, WhatsApp group, and I know who are my enemies. They know who are their enemies, and on no issues actually there's an agreement in fact, and that is the beauty of this. I think those who think that we will canonize theory get frustrated because we never do that. We try to, I think the theory lies in that debate itself, not in canonizing something. So that's the beauty of this group. I hope we'll continue this for a few more generations at least. And let me just announce one more thing, that we have started something that has been a big trouble for us. We are never good at publishing, and some of our friends are doing a lot of publication. But as a group, I think we have not been able to do very well. But I'm happy to announce that we have entered in a collaboration with Ann Books, and they're bringing out a series called Themes in Creative Theory. And the international publisher for this series will be Palgrave. Our first book has been accepted. Young scholars are joining this group to kind of discuss things with us. So 10 books are in the pipeline. 3 have been accepted, but under review. 1 has been reviewed and contract has been signed. So the series will take off very soon. And we are thinking of another series soon, coming out with the papers from these conferences. We are working on that. Also, we have initiated many dialogues. There's a Gandhi dialogue going on, terrorism and non-violence dialogue. We had a wonderful dialogue on this with Professor Douglas Ellen recently. Now, next we are approaching Professor Mark Jugnusmeyer to talk on terrorism and Gandhi. So we have a series of people with whom we would engage with. We have another series of dialogue on working class and contemporary times. So the new laws, how that is hampering, the change in the nature of the work. The first dialogue is already on the YouTube. Our YouTube channel is in place, and our website is being designed. It's almost done. So in next few days, we will be releasing the website with all these things there. And our next stage will be a kind of, I'm just announcing without consulting people at the moment, very informal discussion has been done, something like teaching program, a Vidya Dan kind of thing, where we can design our courses, we can invite people, no fee, it's just kind of interaction. And we hope that people who have left the universities, they would be interested in offering certain courses that they have been doing for long. And the students are actually starving for those courses. So that kind of thing we are imagining at the moment. That is our future project. Thank you very much.
It's a nice course.
I just want to comment one thing, rejoinder. I think we should also account for the 2 lecture series that we had every year. And together with Grassroots Politics Colloquium, I think these 2 programs had been really the springboard of creative theory. Yeah.
Also, we used to have Pablo Neruda lecture, Oliver Tambo lecture. We could, but we are just gathering our strength at the moment. We will do it. I just want to add just a small one line by saying that creative theory is about praxis. And I think from the position of margin of theoretical discourses, high theoretical discourses, we have taken a position on our experiences, and we are actually converting political theory into praxis. That is what we are actually doing. That is creative theory, basically.
Thank you. So it's just 10. We can start our next session.
Has Medha joined?
She hasn't joined yet.
Okay, I think she is.
Yes, sir, I am here. So I think I'll call Survesh and he begin the session.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, distinguished speakers, for your introductory comments. It was very, very wonderful to hear you all. And Let me welcome you all to the 8th edition of Creative Theory Colloquium 2021. And the theme for this year's colloquium is COVID-19 pandemic, grassroots experiences, democratic responses. We'll be beginning with the first session, and the topic for this session is COVID-19 and reconceptualizing grassroots movements, issues for democracy. Chair for this session is Manoranjan Mohanty, former professor of political science and director, Developing Countries Research Center at University of Delhi, and is a distinguished professor at the Council for Social Development, New Delhi. Speakers for the session are Hilal Ahmed, associate professor at CSDS New Delhi, Medha Patkar, who is an Indian social activist working on various crucial political and economic issues raised by tribals, Dalits, farmers, laborers, and women facing injustice in India. Discussant for the session is Mr. Akhil Ranjan Dutta, Head Department of Political Science, Guwahati University. Let me request you all to mute your mic unless you have something to say, and we'll be having question answer session after the speakers are done speaking. I would request the chair to take over and begin the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Survesh. Wonderful to see I must say, the third generation. I think Survesh, whom I am meeting for the first time, at least Priyanka I have been meeting for the last few years, actually, Priyanka. So this is wonderful. And we feel great. I think also Bajpai, Medha Patkar, myself, who belong to an ancient era, and Vidut Mohanty sitting here, we feel absolutely great. And Manindra Savita guiding Hilal and I would say Hilal, Manindra, Savita, and several others. Dharmendra. I may forget some names.
And where is Ujjal?
And Akhil.
Where is Ujjal today?
Therefore, you can see the current of creative theory unfolding. And creative theory, as has been pointed out already this morning, critiques existing knowledge, shows the gaps between existing knowledge and practice and reality and aspirations, and see the interconnections among theory and reality, as Manindra put it, or academic ideas and grassroots experiences, and always moves towards building a creative society, which is an unfolding process. And therefore, the transformative perspective is what drives, but transformative from what vantage point? That is the question we see from praxis. This particular conference has a very clear significance because we have Hilal Ahmed, who was a student when we started Creative Theory Colloquium, Grassroot Politics Colloquium. For 22 years, we had that. And Medha Patkar was one of the early participants and inspirations, and for the last 30 plus years, she has been so. And we all greatly, feel inspired by her work, her writings, her speeches, and her advice. So Hilal and Medha Patkar are the two speakers. That is a real celebration of the creative theory movement. Gail Ombert would have been so happy, and we lost her a few days ago, when we had her to address us on feminism. We Shall Smash This Prison. Her second book had just come out. And first book was that non-Brahman movement in Maharashtra, Ashish referred to that. And then we planned a very important intervention in creative theory to look back. Land, caste, and politics in Indian states. That is, caste question, how should be related to class question. And later on, we brought in gender and other issues, particularly gender. And that volume, so when we have a special tribute to celebrate her works with special sessions, special comments, assessments on her works and her participation in feminist movement, workers' movement, Dalit movement, and the overall alternative perspective, the creative perspective on democratic revolution. We will have more clear discussion on that, and we pay tribute to her memory. Pandemic has shaken up many ideas which are still not recognized by the rulers. And one that we want to emphasize is how the grassroots, also Bajpai did refer to the role that civil society plays, NGOs played, the political society played, the creative society played, the grassroots structures, the panchayat, asha, anganwadi, panchayat can be seen at one level as the third structure of the state, but at another level, it's Gram Swaraj unfolding, or in the Swaraj discourse, it has a different meaning. In creative society, panchayat can be reconceptualized. And that is the kind of challenge COVID presented to us, challenging the development model, challenging the global power structure, challenging the global supply system, challenging the role that neoliberal state has played during the last 30 years particularly, and 2 years now. It was reluctantly drawn to play some public role. And therefore, we have to see how people at the grassroots level, women, workers, peasants, movements, health workers at the ground level, how they played. And we particularly have Medha Patkar's participation and its significance to underline, who has been part of the farmers movement, and NAPM has been of great support to the farmers movement. And the Mitti Satyagraha that they organized coinciding with the Dandi March anniversary, that was a great national all India movement to re-emphasize the role of the peasants, Adivasis, women, and the true patriots for people's freedom. And the present movement that has been started by NAPM and many other groups, Jan Azadi Andolan, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's independence. The People's Celebration Drive, which started a few days ago, and it is continuing all over the country now. We should look into that. So from there to Hilal Ahmed's theoretical propositions, very, very challenging theoretical propositions during the last 20 years. We have a wonderful panel coming up. And Akhil Ranjan Dutt, another product of this movement, now leading a very serious intellectual initiative in the Northeast and globally, the social science research community. From the creative theory perspective, it's going to be a wonderful panel for the next 50 minutes or so. So may I invite now Hilal Ahmed to make his presentation.
Okay. Thank you. So, thank you very much. सबसे पहले तो आप सभी को शिक्षक दिवस की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं। मेरे सामने इस विषय पर अपनी बात रखने को सोचते हुए पिछले 3-4 दिन से काफ़ी चुनौतियां थीं, और मुझे लगता है कि कम से कम इस फोरम में तो हमने ये सीखा है कि जो चुनौतियां हैं और जो भी आत्म संघर्ष की चीज़ें हैं उन्हें स्पष्टतः कह दिया जाए। तो उन चीज़ों को सोचते हुए मुझे लगा कि पहले अपनी चुनौतियां बता दूं और उसके बाद में जो कुछ भी थोड़ा बहुत मैंने पढ़ा है उसको एक ढांचे में रखकर मैं आपके सामने पेश करूं। So the first challenge which I faced was the challenge of language. Obviously, Hindi is my mother tongue, but English is my language of work. So the question of language in that sense could have two meanings. One, the formal meaning in which you have to choose a language to speak. Second is a conceptual language, because we are trained in a particular conceptual framework in which we have our language of social sciences, while on the other hand, we are discussing a different language, the language of activist. So therefore, that's a second challenge. In which way should I speak? Should I speak in a language of social science, or should I speak in a language of activist? So that was the first challenge. The second challenge, which I think very, in my view, it's very crucial, is the challenge of location. My location as an academic and activist location is field. So therefore, in what ways we should engage with each other? And this is the question which we have been struggling for many, many years. So that was the second challenge. And the third challenge was basically the context of COVID. I don't have done any work on COVID, and but one thing is absolutely clear to me, that COVID has not yet affected the nature of political discourse in the country. The nature of political discourse has always been remained. Therefore, what I am going to do is to think of COVID as given, because we all know what is going on around us, and to ask a few questions. These questions are certainly not new, but COVID has somehow forced us to revisit these questions. So therefore, these were the three challenges which I had, and somehow I resolved it that I shall be speaking in English to communicate with the friends who are not familiar with Hindi. Second, I shall be using a language of activist and to link it, without any academic jargons, etc., and try to respond to these in a language of questions. And my final resolve is that I am going to take, as I said, COVID as my reference point. But before I go into my questions, I would also like to assert that we should always get rid of what I called the mentality of victimhood in relation to COVID. COVID pandemic has been given to us as if that we are all victim, and it is something which is coming from nature. My understanding of whatsoever I have read very briefly is that COVID is something which has got human agency involved, and the role of a state is very, very important and crucial. So therefore, as I said, that COVID would be my reference point, but I am not, because I don't know, would say anything specific on the pandemic and its role in relation to Grassroot. Now, these are basically clarifications. Now, what I am going to do is to raise 5 set of issues, which I call questions. And these questions, as I said, are not entirely new. What is new is the context. And I don't have any particular answer to these questions, but I think that during the course of time, and I'm just flagging them in order to create a possibility to rethink these critical issues. So therefore, we have to be very clear that we are not actually not trying to get the final truth to respond to these questions, rather primarily to raise these issues in order to create an engaged dialogue. So my first question is, do we really have something called grassroots movements? In our discussion 30 years back was that something called grassroots is there. But I find big problem in using this term at the moment, and I have 3 reasons in order to clarify what I mean and what my anxiety is in relation to using the term grassroots. First is that role of media has expanded tremendously in last 20 years. So a new discourse, that is media-centric discourse, is providing us images and ideas and resistance which were already there. And this media discourse is also somehow giving us a lot of information without analysis. So the spatial location of grassroots, in my view, it has become less relevant. Therefore, it is very important to revisit this question. Do we really need something called grassroots, which is at the bottom level of society, which is something called local? Because now local is actually reproduced in a global sense through media. So therefore, my first anxiety in relation to using the concept of grassroots is the spread of media and the transformation of local into somehow a global media space. Second is that there is a new phenomena that is emerging, which I called campaign, and we all know about it. Now, these are issue-based things, and people get together and raise these issues. While on the other hand, the idea of movement is very different. You have to have certain agenda, certain people mobilized, they demand something. But in this case, this is not, you need not to have an organization. I can part of any campaign. So therefore, the space of campaign is different from the space of movement. So again, the question arises, what do we mean by grassroots? Now, the third anxiety in relation to using the term grassroots is the distinction which Ashish Ghosh sir made. And it's a very powerful distinction between NGO and movement. That distinction has completely irrelevant because there are many movements which are driven by NGO, and there are many NGOs which are actually transforming into movement. So therefore, our understanding of this distinction is very less, and therefore the idea of grassroots need to be revisited. So that's the first question. Do we really need something called grassroots movement? Now, my second question is related to that, and that is something called, does ideology matter? And I am raising this question of ideology in relation to what I called political correctness. And I'll give you one example to elaborate my point. In 1990s, somehow Indian state, during the time when we started experiencing with global capital, started using a very interesting sectoral approach to address social sector. So you have got something called you have got something to do with women's question, something to do with Dalit question, something to do with Adivasi question, something to do with backwardness question, something to do with unorganized sector question, something to do with Muslims. And what UPA did, they provided, UPA 1 and 2 later, in the later period, they provided what I call academic politics. They provided different academic reports in order to deal with this question. So we are left with discussing reports like Rangnath Commission, Sachar, unorganized sector, etc. But what about the comprehensive idea? And this actually produced some kind of a political correctness. And the internal contradiction between, say, women, Adivasi, Muslim, Dalit were never discussed. And somehow social sector got involved into that. And it had two, crucial impact. One impact of this sectoral approach was that there was no discussion on the nature of emerging power. So we take power as given, so everybody is excluded. But who is included then? That's the second question. That's the second impact of this sectoral approach. Who was the beneficiary of the state from 1947 to 90? And somehow this political correctness produced a figure of a villain. And in our story, the villain was Hindu, upper caste, urban-based male. And this was something which was very creatively, and I've used creative word strategically in this case, very creatively by BJP to produce a Hindutva victimhood. Now, this is a question for all of us. We have completely failed to produce an engaged narrative to counter Hindutva, because we still feel that we still follow the sectoral approach which was propagated by the state in 90s and the political correctness of 90s. So that is my second question. Do we really need an ideology question, or we are actually settled with the political correctness which that is given to us? My third question is, what is social change? We use social change very freely without, and there are a lot of things called social change. In my view, there are three meanings of social change. One, a slow and natural change based on society's own pace. That is social change, by the way. The society of 90s is completely different from societies of 2021. Certainly a change, and it is a social change in which no one actually have done anything. Now, second meaning of social change is a reform, a particular practice of society. We are uncomfortable with society, we assert it, and we got something kind of a change. We also can say that such a social change. And finally, social change can also be interpreted in relation to a particular apparatus or law. So we were unhappy with a certain law, we got it repealed, or we got a new law, etc. That is also social change. But the question is there a difference between social change and social transformation? Because social transformation is a comprehensive transformative project. Somehow, some way, we are settled with these meanings of social change, and there is virtually no discussion on the wider social transformation. Therefore, there is a need to revisit the idea of social transformation. This brings me to the fourth question. And this fourth question is that do we really need a centralized resistance to the emerging centralized form of power? Obviously, in last 20 years and especially in last decade, it is very clear that there is something called economic centralization. We all know that, we all use the term called Adani, Ambani, etc. We used to have Tata Birla in the past. Now that is replaced by Adani, Ambani. But without giving any thought to this Adani, Ambani phrase, we do not have any understanding. Is there any comprehensive collective resistance to it? Now, what is interesting is that there is a consensus in political class. When I use the term political class, I mean that all political parties are part of one consensus, including the left parties. And this consensus is so powerful that they do not allow us to raise some very fundamental questions. For example, is market is the solution for everything? We don't have any discussion in the dominant political sphere. Unfortunately, in the social sphere, or the sphere which we call movement, NGO, civil society, I don't think we have got enough discussion on the question of the relevance of economic centralization and the imagination that market would correct itself. Remember Manmohan Singh's regime to Narendra Modi regime. There is a consensus that market has got a mechanism and it will re-correct itself. So no outside action is required. So if that is the case, then the question arises, does that impact the political sphere? Obviously it does. So the centralization which we experience in the sphere of politics is some way, somehow related to economic centralization. So therefore, there is a need to revisit, do we really need collective resistance? Now, this collective resistance question is very crucial, and that's the beauty of grassroots movements, because these movements have taught us that the party-like structure which was given to us after Soviet Revolution and Chinese Revolution are no longer valid. Now there is a need to combine the question of liberty and equality and to form certain kind of coalition. My problem is that I do not find that coalition making at the wider level. So that's the reason why we have got fragmentation, the fragmented resolve to address the question of collective resistance. So that's the fourth issue which I would like to highlight. Now this brings me to the final point, the final question which I have, the question of grassroots and mainstream. I do survey and ethnography, and in CSDS, I'm part of Lokniti team. So we have got tremendous amount of data in relation to Indian elections. What we observe that if we closely look the electoral politics, is still because of certain structures, the structure of constituency, our election are grassroots centric. So there are three important specificity in relation to electoral politics. First is that constituency is very important, and at the constituency level, you have to speak a different language. Meaning that suppose BJP is campaigning in a constituency, they have got their agenda of Hindutva, but that Hindutva has to be reinterpreted in the local context. So therefore, local languages, local political languages are crucial. And that's the reason why grassroots level is very powerful and crucial. At the same time, that we also find, and that's the second specificity in relation to electoral politics, the trust of people. In our survey, people would say that Supreme Court, they trust Supreme Court, they trust Indian Army, they trust Parliament, etc. But when it comes to local structure, say local court, local police, local bureaucracy, they do not have trust on them. So therefore, there are certainly local anxieties. Unfortunately, there is no intellectual resolve to link these anxieties with the wider state apparatus. Therefore, the question is, are we really hello, sir?
Another 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'm finishing, sir. I'm finishing. So there is an anxiety at the grassroots level, and unfortunately, there is no creative intellectual resolve to link these grassroots anxieties in relation to wider political debates, etc. I do not find any including, I would say, any PM, certainly have failed to do this exercise. Finally, I would like to finish with a quote. And again, I'm glad Maninji mentioned this famous essay that was Manoranjan Mohanty sir produced in 1989, Changing Terms of Discourse. This essay actually finishes with a wonderful quote, and I find that quote is still relevant. So I'll read it and then I'll stop. It says, what we are looking for is a bunch of keys to unlock the structure of power underlying the prevailing framework of knowledge. Scattered keys are being thrown around, exposing the terms of discourse. Now colonial terms, now bourgeoisie terms, now Brahmanic terms, and so on. How to link up these hegemonies? Stringing together a bunch of keys to democratize the terms of discourse is the question. This is inevitable part of a larger democratic struggle. In that struggle, creative theory plays a role by revealing the terms of discourse and replacing them by terms that both be democratic and true. I think answer lies in these formulation, but unfortunately we are not taking these formulations seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hilal, except for the embarrassing quote. Though I still stand by it, I think that is our collective knowledge and formulation. Your questions were most challenging. I would not elaborate them, particularly that political correctness and the sectoral division that still perturbs us, and the local context. Thank you very much for those remarks, those presentations. Now I have great pleasure in inviting Medha Patkar. Medha Patkar has been an inspiration to all of us for over 3 decades. I will not say more than that. Medha Patkar, please.
मोहंती जी आपको सलाम। कोविड पैंडेमिक के साथ साथ जो देश में जन आंदोलनों का उभार आया है, उस उभार में आज एक ऐतिहासिक नहीं, भविष्य की नांदी देने वाली किसान महापंचायत मुजफ्फरनगर में हो रही है, जिसमें मैं अभी मंच पर खड़ी होकर आपसे बात कर रही हूँ। पर मैं इतना ही कहूंगी, इस पैंडेमिक में सबसे बड़ा आघात किया है किसान मजदूरों को, और किसान मजदूरों पर आघात रोजगार पर आधार है, आजीविका पर आधार है, और जनतंत्र पर आघात करते हुए 21 घंटे में 20 विधेयक बिल्स पारित करने वाले नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने जनतंत्र की हत्या करने की साजिश पैंडेमिक के नाम पर चलाई है। 90,000 टन ऑक्सीजन बेचकर ऑक्सीजन के बिना तड़प तड़प कर मरने के लिए मजबूर किया है लोगों को, और हर क्षेत्र में, स्वास्थ्य में भी, शिक्षा में भी निजीकरण थोप कर लोगों के ऊपर उन बुनियादी सेवाओं और अधिकारों से भी वंचित किया है। और इसी कारण इस पैंडेमिक की साजिश को कनाडा के हाई कोर्ट ने नकार दिया है। इस साजिश को कई सारे डॉक्टर्स ने नामंजूर किया है, लेकिन आज लोग अपनी जान को सही बचाना चाहते हैं, पर जीवन है, जीविका है, अधिकार है तो जान है, ये सब कोई जानते हैं। प्रकृति पर जो आघात लॉकडाउन में बड़े बड़े प्रोजेक्ट्स मंजूर करते हुए इन्होंने किया है, उसी के कारण ये हुआ है कि देश का जंगल, ऑक्सीजन के स्रोत बने वेंटिलेटर, सब कुछ खत्म करने का एक ठेका इन्होंने लिया है। ये मानते हैं कि देश के संसाधन है, पर वो समझ ले वो तभी सत्ता में बैठ पाएंगे जब जनता उनको वोट देगी। तो आज ये पैंडेमिक में हमने देखा कि लोग किस प्रकार से समझ गए कि निजी अस्पताल उन्हें लूट रहे हैं, और सरकार ने अपनी जिम्मेदारी अपने कंधों से उतार दी है। कैसे लोग समझ गए कि किसानों के माल को बेचने की मंडी नहीं चलती है, लेकिन इनकी चुनावी सभाएं चलती है बंगाल के चुनाव में। कैसे लोग समझ गए कि सार्वजनिक उद्योग में भी बेरोजगारी छाई हुई है, जबकि 30 लाख से ज्यादा सरकारी पदों पर नियुक्ति करना बाकी है। तो बेरोजगारी किस कारण है? निजीकरण के कारण। वैश्विक पूंजी लाकर गलत उद्योगों में चुनकर रोजगार मूलक औद्योगिकरण खत्म करने के कारण, और आगे चलकर इनकी राजनीति है जो इस अर्थनीति से जुड़ी है। अडानी अंबानी की जोड़ी और नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी ये जुड़कर ही पैंडेमिक में आघात कर चुके हैं। एक ही बात और कहूंगी कि इनके पास पैसा नहीं है किसानों को सही दाम देने के लिए, ये झूठ है। इनके पास पैसा नहीं है मुफ्त शिक्षा और स्वास्थ्य गरीबों तक पहुंचाने के लिए, ये झूठ है। 40,000 करोड़ तो इन्होंने ले लिए विदेशी बैंकों से कोविड के नाम पर, और किसान मजदूर लॉकडाउन ग्रस्त होते हुए उनके अकाउंट में 1 रुपया नहीं डाला। इन्होंने ले लिया पीएम केयर्स फंड में एक बड़ा फंड उन्हीं कॉर्पोरेट से जिनको ये बख्शते हैं, लेकिन जो बेरोजगार हो गए हैं उनको छोटे छोटे उद्योग चलाने के लिए मददगार नहीं हुए। एमएसएमई छोटे उद्योग भी तुलना में मध्यम उद्योग भी आज हैरान है, और ये दे रहे हैं अडानी अंबानी को एयरपोर्ट, स्पोर्ट्स, रास्ते, शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य, हर कुछ। तो इसीलिए जरूरी है ये समझना कि इन्होंने पैंडेमिक के नाम पर लूट की छूट खुद को ले ली है, और अडानी अंबानी जैसे कुछ चंद अब्जाधीशों को भी दे दी है, और नीरव मोदी, विजय मल्ल्या जैसे अपराधी उद्योगपतियों को 68,000 करोड़ कर्जा माफ किया है। तो हम लोग आज किसान आंदोलन पर और विविध जन आंदोलनों पर ही विश्वास करते हैं। यहाँ जो महापंचायत है, लाखों लोग इकट्ठे हुए मुजफ्फरनगर, वो पंचायत मतलब एक गांव स्तर की नहीं है, इस देश के ग्राम स्वराज्य स्तर की है, और इस देश की जन संसद है। और ये वैकल्पिक राजनीति जब तक खड़ी नहीं होगी तब तक इनकी जो कॉर्पोरेटिव राजनीति है, जो विश्व गुरु बनने की राजनीति है, जो किसान मजदूरों को, मेहनत कशों को गुलाम बनाने की राजनीति है, जो विरोधी दलों को अपना आवाज, अपना सवाल उठाने न देने की राजनीति है, वो तब तक नहीं बदलेगी, नहीं हारेंगी। और इसीलिए जन आंदोलनों के बीच में आज जो किसान मजदूर एकता और समन्वय बना है, हमारे 550 संगठन एक संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा में, और ऑल इंडिया ट्रेड यूनियन काउंसिल में भी हमारी सब ट्रेड यूनियन शामिल है। तो आज हर एक नागरिक जो अन्न खाता है वो भी जाने कि इस आंदोलन को संबल देंगे तो एक नई जनतावादी राजनीति खड़ी हो सकती है, और उसी से इनको हरा सकते हैं, केवल चुनावों में नहीं, नैतिकता के आधार पर। और सही अर्थ से राजनीति के जो मतलब होता है वो जनता और सत्ता के बीच का संबंध स्थापित करने का वो नया संबंध स्थापित करते हुए तो मैं आपके इस कार्यक्रम को सदिच्छा व्यक्त करती हूँ और माफ भी चाहती हूँ कि मुझे और जुड़ा रहना संभव नहीं है, पर मैं जुड़ी हूँ दिल से और आत्मा से। मनोरंजन, मोहंती जी और धर्मेंद्र भाई को जोरदार सलाम और धन्यवाद।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया मेधा जी। वो जो महापंचायत से ही आपने बोला और वैकल्पिक राजनीति जो वैप्लविक राजनीति भी है और किसान मजदूर सारे संगठन आंदोलन को का जो सॉलिडारिटी संगठन बना है पिछला 1 साल में खास तौर पे इसका बहुत महत्व है और बहुत सारे सवाल जो हिलाल अहमद उठाए थे थोड़ा थोड़ा सूचक जवाब आपका संक्षिप्त भाषण से हमको मिला है और इसका ऊपर हम और चर्चा करेंगे। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। हम याद रखेंगे कि एक आंदोलन का महापंचायत से मेधा पाटकर मुजफ्फरपुर से हमारे इसमें शामिल हुए, ये कोई नहीं भूल सकेगा और इसका जो महत्व है वो हमारे थिंकिंग और प्रैक्टिस हमारा प्रैक्टिस में इसका बहुत महत्व रहेगा। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। जिंदाबाद। अब मैं प्रोफेसर अखिल रंजन दत्ता, जैसा मैं बोला, एक मशहूर विद्वान हैं और इसी आंदोलन का एक वैचारिक योद्धा हैं। प्रोफेसर अखिल रंजन दत्त, you can I know take it up in English, after which we'll have a short question answer session, a discussion session. Akhil.
Thank you very much. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. It has been a very exciting and very illuminating session. The way Hilal, my classmate, my friend, my colleague, has raised some of the very fundamental questions, both in regard to very understanding of the grassroots and also the very notion of creative. I think that has provoked us a lot, and that has also taken us to a level where we have to introspect ourselves, to what extent we have remained creative in understanding the very grassroots itself. Patkar, with whom I had the privilege of visiting to different parts of the state, including to the larger river dam sites in Assam, and also being part of various initiatives that we took from the very beginning of this 21st century, had also given us new insights. In a way, as Professor Mohanty has said, she has in effect given or replied to some of the challenges or the queries that my friend Hilal has raised. But very interestingly, let me start with what Hilal said initially, that he has 3 important contradictions in terms of language, in terms of location, and in terms of context. I think this remains very challenging contradictions for ourselves, because the Hindutva, in connivance with imperialism, have addressed the issue of language, issue of context, and issue of location maybe more creatively than we have been doing today. If we look at the politics, Hindutva politics in different parts of the country, that the way they have even picked up the language, having contradictions between the formal, colloquial, local, they have been doing it at multilateral level. Look at the speeches being delivered by these politicians. They'll be using all languages. Look at also the kind of legitimacy they have been trying to, procure legitimacy they've been trying to manufacture by penetrating into every domains, including the academia and the intellectual. Therefore, it's a very, very critical moment for us. Remember someone from Assam, a legendary cultural activist, Jyoti Prasad in 1948, while talking about the culture and evil, and he had a different notion of culture. He said that culture is search for light, puhar, Jyoti, and Jyoti is fighting against the evils. And he said that at that moment in 1948-47, the evil was, he defined evil by saying, by referring to capitalism and imperialism. And he said that capitalism and imperialism are the twin brothers. And if we cannot fight against these twin brothers, we cannot, go in search for, or we cannot go in search for the right path or the culture that we have been looking for. But very interestingly, he also pointed out that Indian state itself has become a part and parcel of this evil, duskriti. In other words, imperialism, capitalism, and the state, they themselves had built the nexus, not in bringing, in terms of spreading evils around. And he lost hope in 1947 itself. Remember that Jyoti Prasad was a very active participant of the Quit India movement in 1942, when almost all leaders of the Congress had gone underground. And he was one of the persons who was taking the lead. Now, therefore, the questions that Hilal raised, that the way we projected the Hinduism or Hindu, or for that matter, religion, upper caste, patriarchy, as the challenges, appeals, and those have also been captured by the Hindutva ideology today, in connivance with imperialism, the corporate forces, projecting them as the real alternative to the kind of politics that we had witnessed for 4 decades or 5 decades. Therefore, challenge before us is enormous. And therefore, the fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves, to what extent we understand grassroots? Or in other words, is imperialism, or has imperialism been more innovative in terms of understanding the grassroots than the people like us who have been more committed towards the process of liberation of the grassroots? In other words, in innovating the grassroots, how have they been able or successful towards sidelining, towards marginalizing the very alternative vision of grassroots and their emancipation? It takes us to certain other critical questions. The questions of, at one point we thought that there are contradictions between capitalism and feudalism. We used to think that there's a contradiction between capitalism and feudalism, and we have to take advantage of it. But in 21st century, or the post-Cold War politics have proved that there is no contradiction between capitalism and feudalism. Indeed, imperialism and feudalism have become the allies in pursuing their corporate agenda, in pursuing their political agenda. To explain it, I'll say that now market fundamentalism and social fundamentalism have become the twin brothers. They are the twin brothers. Social fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, political fundamentalism, market fundamentalism, they have become the larger family. Sangh Parivar is no longer the Parivar only of the Hindutva fold. Sangh Parivar has become the larger family of the corporate, imperialist forces, political forces, state mechanism and apparatuses, and also the co-opted intellectual class, and that of the the family members of the larger Sangh Parivar. I think it is in this very particular context, as Hilal has pointed out, let us also look at the campaign. Let us also look at the media. Let us also look at the technology. Let us also look at the discourses which have been, constantly produced. And by using that, how they have also been successful in fragmenting the movements around, the voices of resistance, the forces of resistance around. Now, this fragmentation politics of fragmentation that is being, pursued by the global forces, capitalist forces, the forces of, the state and forces of Hindutva and so on and so forth, has been so innovating, so so smart and cunning. I'll give you one example, and then I'll come back to what Medha has said. Look at the Antika movement in Northeast India, in Assam particularly, that has been so strong. Before the country picked up the Antika movement, Assam was very, in a way, very vibrant and viable space to challenge not only the very politics of Hindutva. But look at as movement started, it had gone to its peak. They fragmented it by giving, by exempting the sixth schedule, by inner line areas, and also promising that some more communities, tribal communities, will also be co-opted into the sixth schedule and so on and so forth. Therefore, are we suffering from the question that, if I can take it from Hilal, are we suffering from real state of depression and disappointments regarding our future? I think Medha has tried to give an answer to it. Even if, this larger family of corporate state, feudal, capitalist, and also the co-opted intellectuals, media and technology, it's a mighty force. It's a very comprehensive force, but that doesn't mean that we cannot challenge it. And that's the answer that Medha Patkar has given. On our part, I think it is the responsibility, it is the task before us. How do we, reimagine ourselves and truly connect with the grassroots? Grassroots, the way it has been captured by these forces. Congress was not able to do it. Despite having the sectoral approaches to development, they had not been successful in that way. Hilal has also mentioned about the CSD Lokniti surveys. I'll give you a very interesting example, and I'll, conclude my presentation. Look at when in Assam the surveys conducted before this 2021 election. One question was asked to them: do you support Citizenship Act, Citizenship Amendment Act? Around 70% said that we do not endorse it, we oppose it. And if you go to the next question, do you think that the state, do you think that having a government at the center and the state are beneficial for the people? 70% of them said that yes, unless and until we have a government, we have the government of the same party, both at the center and also in the state, we do not have the fortunes, do not have the fund, do not have the stability, do not have the peace, and so on and so forth. Therefore, when UPA regime was there, they elected the Congress government.
Please conclude in another minute or two. Yeah.
Yes, sir. 2 sentences only. So when the UPA government was there, they elected the Congress government. When the NDA government came, they thought that it's better to have the BJP-led government here for the salary of the employees, for negotiating peace with the insurgent groups, for having a flow of fund so that we can have developmental schemes of this kind and that kind, and so on and so forth. Therefore, the challenge before us, for the platform like us, it has become more enormous, more challenging, and we have to confront with it with more commitment and imagination. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Akhil. In fact, Akhil had just come out with a fabulous book, Hindutva Regime in Assam, Saffron in the Rainbow. We will have a full-scale discussion soon on that. So some of the questions that were raised by Hilal are also addressed there, and he also responded to some of them. We have a few minutes for open discussion. So please, those who would like to ask. Manindra, yes, you begin.
Yes, I think there are so many questions Hilal has raised, and we need to have a separate session on these questions. I'm sure one day we'll have it. But I just want to pick up one question, this political correctness. I think what I'm worried about today is, and after watching a number of videos, I keep observing what's happening on the YouTube, and I discovered that there is a war going on. It is a war of position. And it seems that radical forces have lost the war of position. It seems to me, maybe I may be entirely wrong, but what I've located 5-7 areas on which new videos are coming up, and their old issues are being opened up. Of course, there are historical issues which are being opened up. Radical forces took a position at that time, which was politically correct position probably. But what is the relationship between political correctness and the truth? That I think is in question. Any collective force we cannot build on the ground of political correctness for a long time. We have to really confront the truth and discover new strategy to challenge the hegemony that is emerging, challenge the forces that is emerging. I think that is one of the issues that is significant. So I would like to ask Hilal, how do we speak to truth? How do we speak the truth? Or how do we engage with truth when truth itself sometimes becoming very difficult to accept? And particularly I'm talking about the context of identity politics which is going on, because every identity has its own way of looking at the truth. Can we build any universal principle on which we can address the questions raised by competing identities on different issues which trouble them? The anxiety that communities are having on various issues. Can we do that? Can we? And what will be the form of that kind of thing?
Thank you. Thank you. Then Nasreen Chaudhary, and then Vidut Mohanty, who has been wanting to ask a question. Nasreen, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, it's not a question. It's more like, kind of sharing some of my thoughts in a very small way. Hilal actually raised some very pertinent issues, and I was just trying to probe it a little further and maybe even provoke him a bit to kind of respond in a particular way. See, when we talk about grassroots, we are kind of going back to the basics, and your question is very, very pertinent. But, grassroots, if you were to locate it during the pandemic, so I was just curious, yes, there's an absence of state, there's a withdrawal of state, and whole, state missing in action. I was just wondering if we can also perhaps relook it in a different way and suggest that this is also an opportunity where a lot of movements are taking place, or there is an opportunity where people are coming together, community, bonding is happening. Maybe I'm being an idealist, but just bear with me. And where else there seems to be not only just opportunity, but there's also collaboration and solidarity. So people are kind of cutting across certain kind of aspect. I won't even say caste and whatnot. I'm not going there. But if that is the case, then should that not be looked at and perhaps given a particular kind of a theoretical understanding? And then what I have in mind is the concept of, seva. This is what I'm working on right now. So let's say, the second wave and whatnot, how many waves that will keep coming. There's certain organizations seem to be out in the streets doing a lot of work, maybe in the name of religion, maybe in the name of whatever that might be. But is there a necessity to engage with it rather than just leaving it aside, say that, oh, but that's a religious body, and oh, but that religion, this religion. So I'm just wondering, shouldn't we take the opportunity here in this kind of a forum and perhaps elaborate or go into it in depth and really talk about collaboration? There is collaboration happening, and this collaboration is actually going to be in a way a challenger. So I'm not saying that the gap of withdrawing of the state can be met, but perhaps this is an opportunity to see and relook and reinvent the whole concept of grassroots, as you very rightfully suggested, but with a slight difference, I was just suggesting. Thank you so much.
I was thinking Medhaji could have talked about the women panchayat leaders' role in the context of COVID. They have been working as a frontline workers. As our grassroots field visit shows us that they have been risking their own life and then, giving shelter, consolation, protection from sexual violence. Nobody talks about that. I wish Medhaji could have talked from that Mahapanchayat experience. Medhaji, you must speak out to protect the women rights, violation of women rights. That's all I have to say today. Thank you all.
Thank you. Now, Anantagiri, please. Professor Anantagiri, MIDS.
Thank you so much, Professor Mohanty and Hilal and Medhaji and friends. My warm greetings. So, Hilal, thank you. Now, among the questions you have raised, the whole challenge of not only reconceptualizing state and market and bringing it to public discourse, but also reconstituting. And to that task of reconstitution, vis-a-vis the challenge of creative society, you have brought these three categories: political society, civil society, and creative society. What is missing is the dimension of self. And secondly, in the whole discourse, there is no reference to nature. And especially as we are...
It's 11 hours.
As we are doing this in the context of the pandemic, that our very conceptualization of categories, including theory, for example. Now, the fundamental question to ask that even creative theory, does it have a fundamental interrogation of the taken for granted anthropocentrism of modernity and even the grassroots politics? This is my second query. And the third query is, given the significance of Seva that Nasrin pointed out, to also bring all of this into the spiritual dimension, that what is the spirit and the spirit understood in a broad way. So these are some of my submissions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I request Hilal to just take 2 minutes. We'll extend by 5 minutes. Yeah, Hilal, please.
So first of all, thank you, Akhil. Great. I really like the way you raised the issue of fragmentation. I'll speak to you separately on this. Manin sir, this is excellent question, by the way, and we agree on this. My suggestion, because my purpose of this presentation was to raise anxieties. I don't have any answer to that, but something which I find relevant is the idea of imperfection in Gandhi. Now, this idea of imperfection is interesting. I have written on it. Gandhi says time and again that human agency is imperfect. So therefore, when the question of creating larger universal principles, he would say that because we have an infinite mind, it would be next to impossible to imagine a situation where you have a blueprint of a good society. So therefore, this idea of imperfection should be a reference point to create or imagine the possibilities. The possibility would come certainly from the world in which we live. So therefore, we have to take this idea of imperfection seriously in order to create an imagination of the political truth which we are referring to. Now, to add to this, I think what I find from my part, and I can speak at least in this forum confidently for all of us, is there is a serious lack of intellectual engagement with this idea. I don't think that we are actually thinking of, remember that people won't come by themselves. There is no autopilot mode. People have to give in some kind of a framework to operate in the realm of politics. That should not be the party vanguard thing. But instead of party vanguard, we have certain outline, intellectual outline to that political truth, which we are not working on. So I think we need to do bit work on that. Nasreen, I completely agree with this. And I would say that collaboration and coalition of different kind must be built. And that's the reason I am always open for dialogue. But while I'm opening to dialogue, this should not restrict me to think of the wider, social transformation ideas. What is missing is that we are actually celebrating fragmentation without looking at the grand ideas which are, dominating us. So therefore, we must have big ideas. Unfortunately, we are not ready to accept big ideas. Anand bhai, this is the central question, and I'm glad you asked this question, and I agree completely with you that nature is missing in my questions. This is an important issue. To add to your two questions, especially the special dimension and the missing link to self, I would say that Gandhi, actually again Gandhi is relevant here, that Gandhi would always give more importance to commitment building. So this commitment building that I am doing actually this political intellectual work for myself. This is my commitment to myself to create a larger morality. And this is something which Medha ji also pointed out. And I'm glad that, in just 5 minutes, she elaborated the idea of political morality, which we are actually searching for years. So this political morality must be rethinked in the light of what you are saying in relation to self and nature. Sir, I think I have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It has been a great session. I will only add that these two things, the truth discourse has to be brought into creative theory in a fundamental way. And during the Satyagraha seminar and around it, we have dealt with it somewhat, but not to push it to an absolutist notion of truth either, a dialectical notion of truth. Again, truth discourse located in practice and self-critic, number one. Number two, if we take the question of language, and we had a few ideas which become central to our discourses in grassroots politics, Swaraj would be one, and that Swa, herself, together with Ubuntu, a mutuality, that is self and self, not self and other, together with Chefang, that is liberation, that is from all kinds of bondages. All selves try to seek liberation. Together with the Latin American concept of buen vivir, live well together, live well with nature, and live with one another. That wonderful composite mutuality concept. Just see a whole alternative world of ideas compose our vision and our methodology of discussion. So creative theory emerging from this historic conference, the 8th colloquium, now unfolds into new realms of possibility. And thank you, Akhil, for raising very fundamental questions, and Hilal for really putting us on the spot and building our movement into a real dynamic force of ideas and practice. And all the questioners, and Medha ji, as usual, her historic role in this effort. Thank you all for a very important contribution in this session. Thank you.
Okay. So
yes,
Survesh, I think.
Yes.
Yes, sir. There are some comments on the chat box. Should I read them out?
No, we have time.
Yes, sir. This session is up to 11:15. We have another 7-8 minutes.
Okay. In that case, can you read out a couple of questions? Then we can ask.
Yes, sir. I don't think there are questions. They're more like in comments. So I'll read them out.
Sorry?
They are comments, sir. I don't think they are questions.
All right. Now, in that case, okay, let me add a couple of things, and others can also add. I think reconceptualizing grassroots, I think it has to abandon this binary between local and global. Now, this local-global binary was created when neoliberalism started in a big push in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. we have to reassert the multiplicity of layers, spatial and that is horizontal and vertical. That is territorial layers, that is horizontal, that is vertical, local, regional, provincial, regional, state, national. Then you have sort of continental, let us say the Bandung community is another, Asia, Africa, Latin America, or the marginalized world as that is not territorial, that is that is horizontal. You see, the marginalized world. In other words, we have multiple layers of different kinds. Recognize them and interconnect them. Please remember, creative theory critiques both absolutism of separateness or absolute autonomy, absolute independence. And it also questions the new absolute which merges all identities, like the Hindutva. You see? So the separateness and the Hindutva kind of aggregateness, both are absolutisms and both are dictatorials. You see? We critique that. We are for fluid, dynamic interconnection, negotiation, struggle, proving that self and self are interconnected and mutually helping each other, believing the Ubuntu concept, I am because you are. I am because you are. You see? And we have to live well, buen vivir. We have to live comfortably, respectfully, and adequately. But adequately in the interest of one another. Okay? For which we are all engaged in Tiefang. We are all engaged in liberation of various kinds. Okay? So the local, global, and that stupid, most condemnable thing, think globally, act locally, my goodness. The hegemonic global ideology of neo-capitalism, neoliberalism, neo-colonialism, they want implemented, Hindutva implemented in a Karbi collar and Karbi dress, or in Jharkhand dress, or colonialism, the Silicon Valley ideals implemented in some local dress. Think globally, act locally. No, that kind of local global binary distorts the reality of interconnection. And we are for autonomy, dignity, in struggle, in dynamism. And that is why, because the present relationships are based on untruths, untrue premises. We are questioning them. We are raising Satyagraha agenda or truth pursuit because we question the untrue premises of existing unfair, unjust relations. Okay? Yes, imperialism is one aggregate system. Capitalism is one aggregate system, and we're questioning that. But there are many kinds of aggregates we are questioning. Patriarchy sometimes aggregates in an equally oppressive way. Upper caste domination does. So how they are interconnected? So interconnection, autonomy, avoiding the problem of ours and yours. You see, that is exclusivity. Okay? Avoid exclusivity and absolutely reject grand mergers. Reject grand mergers. Hindutva is a grand merger. Okay? In fact, that is the neoliberal vocabulary. So grassroots, the reality that you see on the ground, and I'm so glad, theory, reality, an unending process of theory building and practice improving. That is praxis. Okay? And policy improves with every new theory and practice. So that is creative theory. Based on critique always, including self-critique. So many self-critics came today of our group in Hilal's presentation and all your presentations. So this process will go on, and I'm so happy we have made a good beginning. We still have 2 minutes if anybody wants to say.
I have a small question, sir, which you can also answer, but mainly because Hilal raised it. This notion of perenniality of contradictions that he pointed out.
Yes. The perenniality of contradiction. The contradiction is defined as unity of opposites.
Indeed, sir.
Contradiction is a relationship. It is not an opposition. Contradiction and opposition are two different concepts. Contradiction is a relationship. Labor capital contradiction. Labor inherits so many things from the bourgeoisie stage, because bourgeoisie also struggled against feudalism. You see? And so every perenniality of contradiction means there are new harmonies, new contradictions, new harmonies, new contradictions, new synthesis, new thesis, antithesis relationships.
So I think our role as creative theorists is to also locate or understand the ever-changing nature of these contradictions. That's where the real challenge lies. So, for example, who had in fact thought that a certain kind of mutation of Hindutva philosophy will be able to take over power in such a way by which it becomes, as you said, the most aggregated category of political life in India today.
Right, exactly.
Right. So Hindutva was just one component of a contradiction, say, of a bourgeois society, where we thought that they represent some kind of a backward way of looking at things. But we've seen what has happened. They are now championing the newest ideas to the extent that they are most postmodernist. Truth does not matter to them. Truth is not an important concept. Whatever is truth is what they make. And they use media, they use our goodness, they use our disposition to believe in truth, to impose this untruthful situation over us. So I think this is where our theoretical work should now praxis also, like Medha Patkar. What did she say? She said that during this pandemic, jungles have been sold, water resources have been sold, oxygen has been sold. What a nightmare. I mean, the contradiction. Look at the contradiction in the situation located now. Pandemic itself is a big aggregate category, I think, where so many things are simultaneously happening.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think we should be reflecting on this very much. And Hilal, thank you so much that you raised the question. Nobody's asking, nobody's theorizing today contradiction, which is a very Marxist way of looking at things. It is straight dialectical materialism and historical materialism. Until we approach it from this perspective that yes, contradictions are there in our society, that hegemony cannot be established once and for all, that there would always be oppositions, that's where our strength lies.
So we should end it now. Yeah.
So we should
end it, sir.
Seminar on contradictions itself of society.
Pratap, Survesh Pratap, you conclude it, please.
Yes, sir. I humbly thank all the speakers for sharing their thoughts and views with us. And a big thanks to Professor Manoranjan Mohanty for chairing this session. This session has come to an end, and the next session will begin at 11:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the video. Do like and share our video. For more seminars and talk, please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, comment on the video and don't forget to press the bell icon for future updates.